Hello, everybody. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. And Tab, you want to change your name? I think Igba, I can't remember your name. Robert, if that's you under my name, you might want to change your name.
Baby, 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 how long must I be your slave? Baby, 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 how long must I be your slave? You want me to live on, baby, being your slave. I said, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy on me. I said, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy on me. Yeah.
Hello, 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 hello. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Waleisah Wilson. I am the All of Us Are None Georgia chapter lead. Thank you for joining us for this very important Juneteenth conversation. We wanted to have this conversation basically to just educate people on, not necessarily on the history of Juneteenth, but this is a time where we are all celebrating freedom from slavery, when in fact we wanted to just bring it and make it aware that slavery does still exist. Just wanted to get a few housekeeping rules out of the way. If you are not speaking, I ask that you remain muted and off camera, or on camera as well, but be mindful of your background when you are on camera. But also wanted to know that while we go through this event and going forward, that we honor and support using humanizing language, which is person-centered language when referring to individuals who are just as impacted. So I know a lot of times it's very, we get comfortable with the words that we use when we refer to individuals, and most of us are used to referring to people who are impacted by the system as prisoners and inmates, ex-cons, and felons, and other derogatory terms, but those are not terms that we care to hear. Those are not humanizing terms, and those are terms that leave us in a space that we were and do not define us as who we are today, as awesome people. And so we ask that you lead with person-centered language, which is person with a felony, person that's incarcerated, person that's formerly incarcerated, person on probation. person with a substance use, those type of languages that humanize us. And at some point, we'll be dropping some resources that will help you on your journey with using humanizing language. We're not just dealing with or referring to individuals who are just as impacted, but other individuals, even people with disabilities. You would say a person with a disability. And so throughout this conversation, we will have Q&A. Feel free to drop any questions that you may have in the chat, but we will hold all questions at 7 o'clock toward the Q&A session. And we will go first come, first serve is what's being put in the chat. If you prefer to ask your question live, feel free to do that as well. But all questions will be held until the end during the Q&A session after the panel discussion. And other than that, we will drop some links about the humanizing language, and then I will let you know a little bit about what we do at All of Us or None. All of Us or None is a national organization. It is a grassroots civil and human rights organization that fights for the rights of formerly and currently incarcerated people and our families. We are fighting against the discrimination that people face every day because of an arrest or a conviction history. The goal of All of Us or None is to strengthen the voices of people most affected by mass incarceration and the growth of the prison industrial complex. Through our national grassroots organizing, we are building a powerful political movement to win full restoration of our human rights. You can learn more about All of Us or None's work by watching Locked Up, Locked Out on their YouTube channel, and Enough is Enough. And we'll make sure we drop those links as well. The Georgia chapter is also a part of the National Abolish Bondage Coalition, which is a national coalition that works to end legalized slavery in every state. And so all of these links that we drop, we will also be sure to send to you all. But you can also, if you go to your chat, to the little three, if you're on a computer, you don't really, you're not able to do it on your phone. But if you're on your computer, you can go to your chat where the smiley face is, and there are 3 dots, and you're able to save your chat. Currently, the Georgia chapter is working to end Georgia's slavery law that currently legalizes slavery for those convicted of a crime. And although in some states, incarcerated people earn as little as 8 cents an hour, Georgia incarcerated, and with the exception of one location that earns less than $1 a day, or I think we have some facts on that, incarcerated Georgians do not earn any money with the labor that they produce. Incarcerated people throughout the country produce about $12 billion each year in services and goods for corporations, while they're not paid anything at all. And so we intend to follow the lead of other states who have successfully ended slavery and involuntary servitude in their states. We ask that you join us as either members of our chapter or your local chapter if you're joining us from outside of Georgia. Share our social media posts, our YouTube videos, and sign our petition to end slavery in Georgia, because that is our current goal, to end Georgia's slavery law. Also, we have partnered with Worth Rises, a national organization, as well as Mural Arts, and we are currently seeking ATL area organizations and community partners to host a mural to support ending slavery. The mural will actually support our Ending Slavery in Georgia campaign, as well as the national End the Exception campaign. Both campaigns are fighting to end the exception in the 13th Amendment that still allows slavery as punishment for a crime. In the Georgia Constitution, it is listed that slavery is still legal if used for the punishment of a crime. The mural will be part of a series of murals that are taking place across the country and states fighting to do the same. If you are a church, a law firm, or agency in the Metro Atlanta area, and you're interested in donating your building space for a mural to support the state and national campaigns to end slavery, we will be having a Zoom on next Wednesday, the 21st at 3 p.m. for an info session to learn more on how you can partner with us on this project. We are also looking for artists, formerly incarcerated artists, to do the mural, and they will be getting paid $6,000 to help with the production of the budget. And we will assist with the wall location assistance and inclusion in the Mural Arts network of artists and access to training resources. And again, all of these chats will be dropped. These links will be dropped in the chat. All right. And you'll be able to learn more about ABC and how to get connected with the Abolish Bondage collectively, as well as our chapter, national chapters, and the information about the Zoom webinar next week for Atlanta area organizations, churches who are interested in having their building with the mural, as well as the artist information. Now, before we get started with tonight's discussion on why Juneteenth is no time to celebrate the ending of slavery, we will watch a brief documentary that I myself produced as a formerly incarcerated activist with Represent Justice. I was a 2022 ambassador, and Represent Justice highlights the leadership of formerly incarcerated activists and organizers through the arts and media. And this was something that was very passionate for me, and I chose the filmmaking route. It is about 14 minutes long. And while you watch this video, I want you to think about the famous speech of Frederick Douglass, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" I implore you to use this same question with Juneteenth, because what to the incarcerated slave is the 4th of July and Juneteenth? I'll get ready to share it, and I hope you all enjoy.
The 13th Amendment bans slavery with the exception of folks who are incarcerated.
Okay. The 13th Amendment is what empowers the longevity.
Can everybody hear that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
In the process of slavery.
Slavery is abolished except if you've been found guilty of committing the crime. So if you've been found guilty of committing the felony, you no longer are an American citizen. You are now a slave.
And when you call the Department of Corrections, they will tell you in no uncertain terms, check your 13th Amendment. It's legal. You get convicted of a crime, then we can work you.
Prison is a business. It's a business.
Yes.
Whether it pays people or not, it is a booming business in this country.
Incarcerated people provide over $11 billion in services each year. And that is from working in plants, that's making furniture, lingerie, working in call centers. And they're working as garbage collectors. They work as clerks in the courthouse.
The city using laborers to clean the buildings. I see them at the fire department.
Fighting forest fires. They're doing landscaping on the highways, a lot of water treatment plants. They clean up parks and recs.
In the conditions with no heat, in the conditions in the summertime with no air.
You know, I mean, the conditions were deplorable.
And the more you look, the more you see. They don't know our Braille translation services happen, our license plates, masterses for our public parks and for our higher education. All the paper products, an enormous amount of things. People really are unaware.
I see them walking around in the government center. Nobody supervising them. They got the striped suits on. They paint. They doing plumbing. They just, that's their job. Okay. But then when they get out, they can't come and wait for the city to get the same job.
People are not going to the factories because they got a new factory called a prison.
Prison slave labor runs Columbus. They had to lay off a whole bunch of workers in order to replace them with prison slave labor.
You know how much money that's saving the system by having people incarcerated do that?
Certainly, folks are being employed unpaid to do jobs that other folks could be paid to do, right? Yes. And there are a lot of those jobs.
There'll be more jobs available on the outside for people that's not incarcerated, because if you got 100 people working from inside a prison, outside, that's 100 jobs that people that's free can have.
Cannot get that job.
Yeah.
When you go and apply for that job, they say we're not hiring. Why would they pay you $30 an hour when they can get somebody to do it for free?
People don't understand. People say, oh, I support incarcerated people's labor, but what they're not understanding is that contributes to unemployment on the outside.
Right.
Myself, I've been in prison before. I was in the federal prison in Estelle, South Carolina, and I only made like $12 a month. But we built forklifts for the military.
And most of these jobs, if not all of them, when they get out, they cannot get jobs with those same positions.
So now you're going to try to get employment from the same people who's employed you for free, and you can't work for them. And they say, well, I can't work for you because the state law says you can't work for me if you got a felony. So why doesn't that law apply when I'm incarcerated?
It's legal. This is Mayor Teresa Tomlinson. She said it's legal. And I said, just because it's legal, it doesn't make it right.
If people are working, they deserve to be compensated. And where you are living, whether by choice or by law, doesn't affect the fact that you are doing labor that deserves compensation.
Yes. Are you aware that there are some folks who have actually refused to work and get punished? They get their phone calls and visitation taken from them, or get thrown in solitary when they refuse to work.
That's what I was about to say. In the feds, if you don't work, you go to the hole. It's called a shoe.
So therefore, it's not optional. It's not volunteering.
No, it's mandatory.
So when you're made to work for free, that is slavery. Why is it so sensitive when we hear terms like slavery and don't correlate that with incarcerated people?
The first part comes with us not actually engaging in addressing what this country has done historically and currently. And so people are defensive. The second part is I think people really don't know. People really have no idea how much labor is done in the state of Georgia through our correction systems.
They knew that you couldn't continue to call people slaves. They said, but people will accept if you call them a criminal.
Basically, it's convict leasing, which is an old thing where they basically say, hey, we talked to a construction worker. The construction worker going to give us $10,000 a month if we send them 5 convicts. They're going to pay us $10,000. We're going to make the 5 convicts go over there to work. The convicts ain't going to get paid, but we just got paid $10,000.
You utilize them for years while you're in the institution. Again, you're good enough to utilize them while you're in institution. Those skills are great to assist while you're there. Do those things, make money, push out the numbers you need so that the state looks great. Go out and give them the diplomas, assist them all. But then when you get home, you can't get employed.
Many of these towns, these townships, these little small Hickville locations would not have booming economies if Black bodies were not taken from the inner city and the bond money being moved from the inner city to these little small hick towns and building the prison and building a new high school and building a new housing and building the shopping plaza and building the economy.
The census helps you get parking lots, they help you get accessible, all these different things, and you're telling me you counted me in a county. That's why you see a lot of these prisons in these small, poor counties, rural counties, because that's how they make their money, off your speed tickets and off the prisons. And they're counting those 5,000 people as residents to say, hey, we need more handicapped parking spaces. We need a recreational center. We need this and we need that. You're counting these people.
They are counted, yep.
But they can't benefit from the fact that, you know, they're able to go to that same park that just got built off of their numbers with their kids.
Most of the time when there is refusal on banishing different systems or adding programs, money is the common driver. So what about the money is going on that they're so hard pressed to not let go of it?
They have stuff like that, and they say we need people at the civic center. We just had a flood. We need people to come clean this road. Or we had this. Why are they not saying we need to hire 15 people down here at the civic center? We need to pay 20 people to come and do this. Why are they not doing that, and why are they choosing to use incarcerated people?
Because it would cost them money instead of making it would cost them money and not make them money.
And the goal is to make money.
And the goal has always been to make money. And also it's always to keep the city in a position of dominance.
Here in Columbus, I know trash went from 2 days to 1 day a couple years ago. And last year, the mayor cited in an interview that he did with the news that the residents were complaining because trash had been backed up and folks were complaining why it wasn't being picked up. And they asked him what was the reason why the trash wasn't being picked up. And he said, well, we don't have enough prisoners, i.e. we got a shortage of slaves. And so I immediately felt like when you say we have a shortage of slaves, the result is we got to figure out what we have to do to get more slaves, to get out here to dump more of our trash.
When I went to the license plate making factory, what I was told was that folks who were chosen to work this job were chosen because they would be there for a long time. Now, if it's a training job, if it's intended for you to be able to transition to another job, then wouldn't you want folks for whom that transition is going to happen? Wouldn't you want as many folks to be helped as you could?
They should be able to just transition right on into that job, because obviously it's a job because they had them doing it. So why couldn't, if I'm doing it right now and I'm getting out in 6 months, why can't I just transition and that's my job when I get out?
It's making too much money for it to make sense right now.
And the criminal legal system itself is based on a
monetary thing.
You know, the IRS, Waleisah, even has something on their website that makes a notation that just because a person is incarcerated does not exempt them from paying federal taxes, federal income taxes, if they qualify to pay them. And the Department of Education has a notice on their site that lets people know that they don't get an automatic deferment just because they're incarcerated and not making money from paying those student loan payments. So I want people to be full well aware that we have federal regulations that make sure we're still paying on things that we owe on, even while we're in carceral systems, slavery systems in the state that don't allow us to make money.
If you took away what the I hate this word, but what the inmates do inside of facilities, that would open up so many doors for so many community members who are without jobs.
Once you become a ward or of the state or the feds, there's no way for you to get reintroduced into society as a regular American citizen.
They can work you for free because you don't have the rights to defend yourself. You don't. That's why when you get out, you gotta get your right to vote back after a certain time. You gotta get your right to bear arms after a certain time, and that's if Georgia decides to give them to you. They don't come back automatically.
Voting rights, right? So some people say, oh, restoration of rights, but there's another step there, right? Why are you losing your rights at all?
The people who have lost everything because of incarceration are the people who are the most willing and able to commit to jobs when they come out. Those people can be committing to those jobs when they're inside.
The method doesn't match what's actually happening, right? If it were training, we should see the program focused on transition. But that's not what we're seeing.
This society had basically created mental health problems in our community.
The degree to which we criminalize and incarcerate folks, it really fuels the cycle of poverty in our state. You know, it really, really does. we are taking resources from people and putting them into a system that only makes things worse for those people and then everybody that those people, you know, is associated with.
We got to go deep into the DNA of this whole system because we cannot fix this system. We're to create our own system, and system still sharpens still, systems sharpens systems. So as we build our own system, that's going to be the primary thing. When they come out, they got to be a part of this system that we're creating.
In order to end mass incarceration, we have to have an employment component.
People being able to contribute to their communities and reap the rewards of that is how you build sustainable communities, period.
How can you prevent crime if you do not give people the tools and resources to be able to better themselves and come back to a contributing member of society?
And part of that resources is a job.
We have to create a post-incarceration reentry system that actually guides them into a trade or a profession.
To change the charter to allow someone with charges, that's part of it, to change the city ordinances and state laws to allow, you know, people with records to actually work for the government. I mean, they're already working.
They're already working for the government. They
So
just ain't getting paid.
why not have different amendments made to keep them working?
The more states we get who are willing to say out loud, we don't support slavery here, we are going to change it at the state level, the more push we get for the federal. Common
sense says this is why our crime rates are high, this is why our homelessness is high, this is why our communities are the way they are, because we're not giving people what they need to succeed. And when people don't have a job, you're going to continue to have high crime. And to actually train somebody to use somebody under the guise of saying it's for training, and then when they get out because they have a felony, they can't get a job. It's an excuse.
Well, thank you all for watching that. I hope you all enjoyed it. At this point in time, if any questions that you have, I'll be on a panel later on, but we will from this point go ahead and move into our next part of the event, which is the panel question, which everybody's been waiting on. And so from this point, I'll go ahead and share I'll be sharing just the flyer again with everybody's pictures on it, but we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Robyn Hasan, who is a Georgia chapter member, but she's also the very awesome and dynamic executive director of Women on the Rise. And so from this point, Robyn, you are good to go.
All right, thank you for that, Waleisah. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start off by welcoming you all to be here and listening to this information. It's very helpful for the things that we all endured while we were inside. So I'm glad that we're actually attacking this issue. So I'm going to start off by reading the bios of our panelists tonight. The first person we have is Dr. Chalana McFarland. We call her Shay. She is a 2021 Presidential Executive Clemency recipient, being freed after serving nearly 17 years in federal custody as a person with a first offense. Prior to her incarceration, she practiced law in Atlanta, Georgia, after graduating from John Marshall Law School. She is an honor graduate of Florida A&M University, where she earned a BS in journalism. Since her release, Chalana is a vocal advocate for criminal justice and prison reform. She is a sought-after keynote speaker and is the author of the upcoming book, Collateral Consequences. She currently volunteers as a board director of NewLife-Second Chance Outreach, Inc., as a project manager for Can Do Clemency, co-chairs a legislation reform cohort, and served as the administrative in-reach coordinator for the Ladies of Hope Ministries. She has been an organizer for the Women of Color Initiative, Georgia Statewide, Pro-Georgia Survey Project. Additionally, she serves on the advisory board of Fighting for Freedom, the Atlanta Incarcerated Art Project, and Atlanta Women on the Rise. She also served as a faculty member for the 2021 National Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys 20th Annual State Criminal Justice Network Conference. Chalana is a featured contributor to the column Clemency Corner for the West Side Gazette. Chalana has appeared on NPR, Story Courts, PBS NewsHour, A Neighbor Choice, and the Roach Brown Show on Sirius and iHeartRadio. She and her story has been featured in web stories circulated by the ACLU and Barrett Institution's websites. She is the proud mother of a college graduate student and currently resides in Atlanta, Georgia metro area. So thank you for being here, Chalana. And next is our dynamic Melanie Jones. She started with Women on the Rise in June 2022 as the assistant to the executive director. Melody was harshly convicted of a crime during her teen years and spent 20 years of her life incarcerated inside of Georgia State prisons. During her time inside, she used her access to the system to improve herself and the women around her. She completed many programs inside, such as receiving her license in cosmetology, completing a dog program, vet tech program, along with welding and a multitude of other skills. Melody did not hesitate to share her skills and drive and what kept her successful during her prison sentence, which proved for her to be perfect for the role she was promoted to in August of 2022 as a membership organizer. Since starting her role, Melanie has been able to foster relationships with members of Women on the Rise that promote stability and safety for women re-entering society. Melody's motto is, I am well-read, not well-lived. Melody is growing Women on the Rise membership base and continue to learn to live life on the outside. So welcome, Melody. Atia Holly is Southern Center for Human Rights Deputy Director. She formerly served as a senior attorney and more recently managing attorney in Southern Center for Human Rights Impact Litigation Unit. Atia originally joined Southern Center as an investigator in the ILU for 4 years before returning in 2010 as an Initiative for Public Interest Law for Yale Fellow. Atia has litigated cases challenging the denial of the right to counsel for poor Georgians, illegally closed courtrooms, wealth-based detention, inhumane prison conditions, and the denial of utility services based on court debt. In addition, Atia, along with managing attorney Patrick Mulvaney, has spearheaded Southern Center's effort to end extreme sentencing in Georgia. Atia is a 2010 graduate of Gideon Promise and currently assists the organization with training public defenders. She was named a 2007 On the Rise Georgia Law by the Fulton County Daily Report. In 2022, she was named a finalist for the David Carlinier Public Interest Award, which recognized outstanding public interest lawyers that exemplifies the legacy of David Carnelli, who was a national champion of justice and innovative litigators who was devoted to protecting civil rights and combating injustice on a systematic basis. She received her BA in history from Dartmouth College in 2002, graduated from the University of California, Berkeley School of Law in 2010, and is a member of the Georgia Bar. So thank you very much for all of our people here and our panelists. And you already know Waleisah, and we've already talked about Waleisah. So we're gonna jump right into the first question, which is for you, Waleisah. So what inspired you to create the film? And what are some of the facts and myths that you want to make known?
Well, like I said, originally, what kind of inspired me to create the film was while I was actually sitting in a Waffle House, and I was sitting next to an elderly white man who was complaining when he saw the incarcerated people come out and do some landscaping. And he basically was like, this is why my nephew can't get a job, because all of the inmates and the Mexicans are taking all the jobs. And I said, well, for one, to have a job, you should be getting paid. And for two, they're not taking those jobs, they're being forced to take that job. So I really I felt like a lot of folks were really uneducated on prison slavery. And then just in conversation with a lot of Black folks who feel like, you know, we're free, we're doing this, but people never really think about it from the sense of mass incarceration, which is the new slavery, which is rooted out of the Black codes, which is, you know, out of the 13th Amendment. A lot of people don't even know that the 13th Amendment has an exception in it that says slavery basically is still legal if a person is convicted of a crime. And so when you look at that and say, okay, so then they started creating laws that triggered them, that once the 13th Amendment came out, slave owners were like frantic about what we're going to do about our free slave labor. Oh, let's figure out ways to get us some more slaves. So we'll lock them up and give them felonies. And this is how all of this has come about, which is the convict leasing system, which again, I said is not a great word, but you basically are giving companies, it's human trafficking. In other words, when people are working to produce something and no money's exchanging their hands, but it's only exchanging the oppressor's hand, that's human trafficking. And so that's what I wanted to do. And then I also wanted to bust the myth that even people who look like me say, oh, it's great. Why are you wanting to end it? Because that's their punishment. That's what they should be doing in prison. It teaches them a skill. It teaches them training. It's rehabilitative. Nothing's rehabilitative if you're not getting paid for it. It's not making you feel good. It's not providing for you and your family. And you're placed in dangerous conditions and you don't have any protections. There's nothing rehabilitative about that. And when something is supposed to be rehabilitative, it is supposed to be something that allows you to grow and get some production out of it, as opposed to everything exchanging hands in one way. So I wanted to bust a lot of those myths. And so that's why I did it.
Okay, thank you for that. But I also, just to add, when you said about somebody that's this is rehabilitative and things of that nature, but also think about they're doing that same job they can't get when they get released. So
yes,
they have to think about that as well. Right?
And a lot of people don't realize some of those people work on your trash truck. They do honestly, trash trucks, engineering, water treatment companies, construction, landscaping, all of these jobs that incarcerated people are doing, because the state says that you are technically a slave. These people work these jobs for years and decades, get out to try to apply for those same jobs. And they say, well, we can't hire you because you got a felony, or we're not going to hire you because we're not hiring. When then technically they don't want to pay anybody $25 and $30 a wage because they'd rather let a slave do it for free. So that is what I was explaining to that old white man in Waffle House, that you need to be, your problem is not with incarcerated people. Your problem should be with the city of Clayton County and the city of Fulton County and these other counties who are doing that. You need to have your gripe with them as to why your son has gone to school for 4 years for a trade and is being denied a job because they don't want to pay him, but they'd rather pay they'd rather use a slave.
Exactly. Thank you, Waleisah. All right, our next question is for Chalana. As a formerly incarcerated woman, can you tell us briefly about your experience with state-sanctioned slavery and any negative consequences you or others may have experienced from refusing work?
Certainly. It's so good to be on here with everyone. I see all of the faces, and it's just wonderful to be asked to talk about my my experiences. I served 17 years in the federal system. And during that time, out of the 17 years, I would say 15 and a half, I worked in some form of slavery while I was inside. When I first started, I was assigned to the kitchen, and I worked longer than 12 hours many days. They wouldn't release us to come back to the housing units on a move, so you had to continue to work. And at the end of the month, I got a check for $5.25. And I remember going to my boss saying, hey, I think accounting made a mistake. This is how naive I was. Even as a former lawyer, much like much of society, I was clueless about the enslavement that goes on within our penal system. But I told him, I said, I think this might have been supposed to be $525. I worked a whole month. You know, I know we don't get regular wages like outside, but, and he says, hold on, let me put you on with my supervisor so you can explain to him. And he puts me on speaker, and it was one of the even almost 20 years later, it's still one of the most belittling experiences that I had occur to me, because I heard these men laughing at my naivete that, yes, my check was $5.25 and I should be lucky and grateful that I got that. At that time, I didn't understand what that meant until I realized that there are jobs that don't pay anything at all. Prisons cannot function without the labor of the slaves. So your kitchen runs, your landscaping around, if you ever go by a prison, you see how pretty the grass looks and the bushes. We're doing that. There's also janitorial. If you ever go inside of a prison or really any government building, there's so much wax on the floor that it looks like a sheet of glass. And these people care more about that wax on the floor than they do the people that are putting it down. There have been so many injuries that have occurred while people are trying to put hot wax down on the floor, because you're not given any training. You're given the supplies and you're being told by another incarcerated person on how to do it. And a lot of people get hurt. And when you're hurt inside, you're not subject to the same protections that you get on the outside. There's no OSHA. There's no Occupational Safety and Hazard Administration on the inside. If you're hurt, you're just hurt. And that is, unless you die, if you die, your family can file a claim. Or if you're maimed, they may be able to file a claim, but you're still going to be incarcerated with the loss of that limb that you had. I've seen women that were assigned to the roof to work on putting shingles on the roofs that had to go up there and they didn't have the proper vest and bracing, and they fell off. They just fell right off, and they did nothing for them. I've seen them where they dug holes to replace pipes, and then the holes collapsed, and then other incarcerated people had to run and try to dig them out. The things that I've seen has just been mind-boggling. And I decided after I didn't want to work in the kitchen anymore, I went to the call center where I was a 411 operator for Cricket. So if you had Cricket cell phone service and you wanted a number, this is before, we could use the internet the way that we could now. But if you called 411, you talked to us. And we made no money. We also did telemarketing, and that is still going on. But the thing about that is that even when you sell, the prison takes your commission. So on the outside, if you made a sale and you might get $10 for that sale, the company will only give you $1 to 50 cents for that same commission. And what people don't seem to understand is that you still have children to support on the outside. You still have to buy hygiene items, sanitary napkins, soap, things that are not provided for you. And when you don't give us a chance to earn a wage and you're forcing us to work every day without pay, it's detrimental all around. And when you don't work, and I had this situation to happen to me personally, there was a riot at the men's prison, which was affiliated with the camp where I was placed. So we provided support services to the men's penitentiary. Well, they decided that it was cheaper to send the women into the penitentiary, into the men's penitentiary, to work in food service, as opposed to having staff do overtime. So they forced us to go in, and while we were in, there was a man who was obviously some type of mental health person. He had some issues. He chased us literally, and all we could think is, don't be the last one that he gets, because he's going to rape you. And so the next morning when they called us to go to work, I told them I refuse. I'm not going back. I was assigned to serve my sentence at a female prison, and there's nothing that's justifying me going into a male high security penitentiary and risking my life. And they immediately took me to the county jail that afternoon, and I stayed there for 4 months, and then they shipped me 16 hours away from home, where I had only been an hour and a half before. So it is retaliatory, it is vicious, and companies such as Victoria's Secret, Starbucks, JCPenney's, do your stockholders know what you really do? It's like, you guys, there's constant stories about these poor people over in China that are working in these sweatshops, and I feel for them, and I think that that's absolutely wrong. But it's also happening right down the road in your county. What about us? And that is a huge issue. There's an $11 billion industry that is being moved forward on the backs of incarcerated individuals, and it is wrong. And it is a system that is designed to perpetuate itself. When you receive your sentence, more than likely the judge is also going to give you either a fine or restitution, and you're going to have to pay those. And you pay them while you're inside. Oftentimes, there's no relief, even though you're giving them your body with your blood, sweat, and tears. You're still going to have to pay. If in the federal system, they take it out of any wages that you have. And if you don't have wages, then they make your family pay it, or else you get in trouble. And so they have these fines and restitutions. And then when you're released, probation requires that you pay them in probation fees often. And when you can't pay that because you can't get a job, even the companies that you work for on the inside still won't hire you, then you're in violation. And you go back before the judge, and the judge says, oh, well, you didn't pay this fine and this restitution, so I'm going to recommit you to prison. And so you go back again. And so it's like being, you were able to escape slavery and make it across the Mason-Dixon line, and the judges are slave catchers and the probation officers are slave catchers, and they bring you back into the same traumatic experience that you've had. And it's just wrong. There's something just fundamentally inhumane about prison labor, and it has to be stopped. And we have to tell America what's going on. People don't know. People don't understand what happens. Even as a person, as an attorney that took an oath to uphold the justice system, and Tia, you can understand this. We swear that we're going to abide by the Constitution of the state and the United States. And we're not aware of what we're agreeing to. And Americans are not aware of how this impacts each of them. And I think it's just important that we understand that prison labor is not a mechanism for rehabilitation, because you can't get a job when you get out. So I don't understand, how am I being rehabilitated and taught these skills, and then when I get out, I worked as an electrician for 15 years on the inside, but when I get out, the state won't give me a license to be an electrician because I'm a danger. But yet and still, I worked as a trustee, and I was around, people all day long, and there wasn't anything that happened. So now suddenly, why am I a danger? It's all an illusion. And it's time that we stop the smoke and mirrors, and we talk about what this really means. And we force the prisons to develop wage earning jobs and meaningful reentry. And it's not, it's about saving lives at this point. And it just hurts me to my heart to look at what happens. And I'm just so fortunate that we're having forums like this and we're able to talk. And I ask each of you, talk about this at your dinner table, talk about this at your church forums, let people know what's going on, because it is that important. You will be saving lives.
Well, we definitely gonna have to have you back on for another thorough conversation. But yeah, we got about 6 more questions to get in, so before we can try to do this, but we definitely gonna have to have you back on, Shay. Thank you.
That was really informative. Thank you. All right, our next question is for Melody. Melody, I'm gonna break this up into 2 questions and make it a little bit simpler for you. A lot of people still think prison slavery is an issue that only impacts men. But as you know, there are a large number of women who are forced to work as slaves for the state. If any, can you tell us of any personal experience you've had as a slave of the state?
Well, during my 20 years of incarceration, I had many and much experience. I have been, I don't know if you can see all my accolades on the wall, I have been trained, and I have every trade that there was in all 3 of the prisons. I'm a master cosmetologist. At times, they would have me doing hair from 9 in the morning to 12 at night. And their excuse was, well, at least you don't have to be in the dorm with no air. At least you're up here and you can watch TV. I've done children's hair for their weddings on the weekend. If you don't, then either you don't live where you want to live. If you don't, then either they'll send you to lockdown or they'll start shaking you down all the time to send you to lockdown. After that, I have done grooming their dogs, vet tech. People want me to train their dogs. They wake you up all times of the night, come into your room and want you to make your dogs do a pony and show routine while you sleep. I have experienced this on all levels, doing maintenance from changing wax rings on toilets to waxing their floors. And I mean, the consequences. And they tell you, hey, well, we let you live where you want to live, or we let you, just be at peace. So just to keep down the noise, you do it.
Feel like they're doing you a favor. Yeah, and when you're giving them services that cost them hundreds of dollars. Yeah. Okay, so being a membership organizer, can you tell us any challenges you may see in your work with Women on the Rise by serving the experiences of prison labor and how it impacts the women that are coming home when they're seeking employment or they're managing their money or anything like financial obligations to the women? Like, do you see anything of how having prison labor and that experience and coming home, how it affects them?
One of the things I mainly saw, and it's not just them, well, not just our members, but myself. I went to the transitional center and I was trained as a MIG welder and a TIG welder. We got a job in the local county of Toccoa, and once we were released, we could not work at the factory and get the same wages as the men that worked there. They wanted to we started off at $13 an hour with the transitional center. The other men there were working, making $30 an hour. But once we were released and we tried to get a job at that same place, they only wanted to give us $19 an hour. We had worked there for a whole year. We had did the highest numbers that they had ever accomplished. Because we were women, also we were welding, and we had something to prove because we were formerly incarcerated. So we worked. We took no breaks, we worked, but they still didn't want to pay us. The ladies that are getting out of Pulaski, I don't know if anyone has ever been in Pulaski and worked in PI. PI makes all the uniforms for the state of Georgia and the officers. They teach you everything, every machine in there. And the GCI place is right here in Decatur. Do you know he will not hire you? You can work there all your life. You can be trained at every sewing machine he has. He will not hire you. And he comes down there every Christmas and buy you a chicken box and they tell you, yeah, I'll hire you guys as soon as you get home. I'm gonna make sure that you can work for us. And when you go down there, it's a myth. You can't. So a lot of the ladies are like, yeah, I can do this, I can do that. He said he was gonna give us a job because he's still telling the same lies, and they don't.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you very much for that, Melody. My next question is for Atia. Ms. Atia, in your article, you spoke about today there is a market in incarcerated people. Please tell us more about what that means and why Georgians should be upset about it.
Thank you, Ms. Robyn, and I echo the panel appreciation for the important conversation. What I meant by the market in incarceration really was taking the phrase that researchers have used to describe the state of our criminal legal system, our mass incarceration, and the fact that our system of mass incarceration is really built off of money making. As Lucy mentioned in Waleisah's film, there are a number of entities and government officials who are banking on people being locked up. They are banking on people's freedom being stripped from them. And we see this in the fact that, for example, here in Georgia, our prison system has a budget of well over $1 billion with a B. You compare that to our public defender system that has 20 times less than that, right? Our prison system gets 20 times more funding than our public defender system. And we have just a host of people who are, again, profiting off of people having no freedom. We have cities that create municipal courts for the sole purpose of generating fines so that they can add their city coffers. Ferguson and Georgia cities. We see police chiefs who are fired because they are not collecting enough fines for people. They are not ticketing enough people. And so we have these built-in incentives in our city budgets and our budgets and our government budget. We have private officials, for-profit probation companies that are banking on, again, they are banking on people having no freedom. And that's what I meant by the market of incarcerated people. And that's what researchers are trying to stop in exploring this phenomenon.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Atia. Shay, the next question I have is for you. Why do you think society supports prison labor? And what do you think needs to happen to open their eyes?
Well, briefly, I'll say that I don't think that society necessarily promotes it. I think that they don't know about it. And so there's an apathy that goes on. And I really believe that most people are treat people humanely. And if they knew what was going on, I think things would be different. So I think it's just important that we shine a bright light on the darkness that is going on inside.
Awesome. You're right. I think that you're perfectly right, because a lot of people, they'll say that's part of the punishment, or they'll say, oh, well, they're getting paid. Like, a lot of people did not know that we weren't getting paid, especially people in the North, not knowing that we were not getting paid to work. So the next question, Melody, women are the fastest growing prison population. And some could say that while Black men are intentionally enslaved to do the hard manual labor, such as working as mechanics, landscapers, and construction workers, what is your opinion on some saying that women are being enslaved more because of the state's effort to recoup the losses in the labor force by incarcerating more women for the jobs that are traditionally served for incarcerated women, such as beautician for the prison staff, teachers, cooks, librarians, and laundry attendants?
That's true. That's true. I had them to take me before my time to go to the transitional center to use my license to open up the transitional center's hair salon. Took me way before my time. And once they were done with me after 4 years, they sent me back. So for no reason. Well, you're not supposed to be here. You were here too early. That's not my fault. They were allowing me to work, go home after that, but all they needed was to get their numbers for their audits and for them to get grants and stuff like that. And I was the only long-term cosmetologist that had license, because they stopped licensing the females in Georgia after, I think it was 2008 or 10. And I was the only one that was still there that had a master cosmetologist. So yeah, they're majorly doing that.
It sort of fits the institutional need that we talk about a lot.
At 20-year sentence, they were going to use me everywhere they could.
Yeah, for the people who get the license and things, because we know you did everything that they offered. You took advantage of it, but then they get it out of you one way or another.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so Ms. Atia, you recently wrote an article for the American Bar Association about the criminalization of Dan Colby, a poor Black restaurant worker, and how one small traffic offense led to a snowball mountain of debt and involvement with the system. Can you expand on the connection of the criminalization of poverty and modern day slavery and why we should be concerned?
Yes, I think Waleisah mentioned in her film, the convict police that immediately followed the end of the Civil War and the end of chattel slavery. And that system was really built on re-enslaving Black people who were no longer on the plantations. And the ways to do that was to use that loophole in the 13th Amendment that Waleisah addressed earlier, one that allowed for people who were convicted of a crime to be incarcerated and freedom. And the system basically was set up where Black people were given a choice between either paying a fine for offense that they were accused of or performing slave labor. Given that Black people were fresh out of chattel slavery, very few people give them a chance actual employment. Many Black people up in police systems. I say Black people, children, men, and women, and they were there for no other reason than poverty. And so when I talk about Colby's experience of getting in a jail cell for no other inability to pay it, that's the connection. The fact that the criminalization of poverty is built into our Constitution, built into the 13th Amendment, and is what our country has been relying on since the end of the Civil War, to strip people of their freedom and make money off of those same people.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think when you were saying that, it's just like it was a setup. They would give them fines that they know that us as Black people couldn't pay. So it's like we had no choice but to go into it. All right, so our last question is for Ms. Waleisah. Why is it important for Georgia to end such a racist and profit-driven practice? And what can people in the room do to support that effort?
It's long overdue. I mean, for one, it's inhumane. People are people. And I feel like we need to walk the walk. You know, the South primarily is supposed to be composed of Christian people, but we're not walking the talk that we say. We can't say we're all about, you know, on one line, you'll have people say, save the babies, I'm pro-life. But at the same time, you're at the prison protesting and glad that somebody's getting killed from death penalty. Either you're pro-life or you're for life. Exactly. Either you're for human rights and civil rights or you're not. Working somebody for free for the sole purpose of saving money when you're not saving money. Taxpayers spend $80 billion to incarcerate people. And what is incarcerating doing? It's not doing anything. Incarcerating people is not going to stop crime. Incarcerating people, particularly those with mental health issues, we are just overly incarcerating. Incarcerating should never be the first thing. We need to start spending more money in education, rehabilitation, substance use treatment, and wellness, and restorative justice. Because regardless of what people do, we're not irredeemable. And when you're sentenced to prison, you're sentenced to prison. I wasn't sentenced to go out and work in no field. And when I refused to do that as a disabled 650-pound woman, they threw me in solitary confinement for a year. And I, just like Shay said, we still have bills. And in the film, you heard Lucy say that even as incarcerated people, we are still obligated legally to pay our student loans and any old taxes. And how are you expecting people? And then we completely leave the victims out of the equation. Because if you've had a victim, you should be highly upset that someone owes you restitution and is serving time in prison, working a job where they owe you money, but you can't get any money because they ain't making no money. So we need to, I am asking everybody and imploring everybody to join the movement. If you're in Georgia and you want to work with us on this, because 8 states have already passed it. Several states are working on it this past November. Like I always say, Alabama was one of them. And if Alabama can change their law on slavery, I know Georgia should be able to do that. And so when you stand up and say we're against slavery, that means we are for equity and equality for everybody. And to do that, want you to be able to support organizations that's doing the work. We're going to actually drop some links in the chat. We have a petition going. We will ask that you sign that as well to help us support the ending of slavery in Georgia. But we're also going to drop a chat for Women on the Rise. They are currently working on closing, having a petition going for closing the Atlanta jail. And as you know, when you lock people up, we already know from lockup quotas, when you build a prison with 3,000 beds, that means you have to find 3,000 people to fill those beds. So technically, these are called lockup quotas, where literally prisons are out saying, we got to get people in these beds. We got to get people in these beds. So when you're wondering why they're locking people up for having a broken tail light, or they're locking people up for fighting, or why they're locking people up for not killing anybody, it's because they have to get those beds filled because they make money off these beds being filled. And so we need people in these fights to sign these petitions, to join the Georgia chapter, or if you're outside of Georgia, go online and join us at All of Us or None. There should be a local chapter near you. We're going to make sure we drop that link. And also, this just happened yesterday, or day before yesterday. Senators Jeff Merkley, Cory Booker, and Georgia Representative Nikema Williams have reintroduced the Abolition Amendment in Congress to end the exception in the 13th Amendment on a federal level. We're going to drop that chat for you to go to endtheexception.com to tell your Congress members to make sure you sponsor it today. And a lot of people are saying, why are y'all working on doing it statewide when people are trying to do it federally? Because they just moving too slow, if you just want to know the truth. And a lot of times when stuff is not impacting folks, to me, I just think they move too slow because it's not impacting them. So what's the harm in doing it on the state level? And so we want to do that. And then also ask you to reach out to companies and not support companies who are using slave labor. You know, whether it's Starbucks, McDonald's, and Shay said she answered the phone for Cricket. You got other companies who are using incarcerated people to work 8 to 12 hours a day to answer cell phones, call centers, mechanics, beauticians, construction workers. Again, $12 billion in services. IKEA furniture. While you're paying $7,000 for a furniture, do you know what somebody had to do to make that nice, expensive piece of furniture in the heat? And yes, there are still people in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas working in cotton fields. And I don't know if you can see it behind me or not, but it definitely should be on my screen, where you can see the old shadow slavery with black men in the cotton field with a white man on a horse with a gun. If you go to Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, you can still see black men in a cotton field with a white man on a horse with a gun. It's the same thing. It's a different year, but it's the same slavery. And so I need people to know that involuntary servitude, prison slave labor, you can put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. It's still the same thing. It is still slavery. It's wrong and it's inhumane. And so again, we're dropping chats in the link, and we ask that you join these movements and also hold these businesses accountable. Let them know you're not going to be paying for them if they're using slave labor. Thank you all so very much. And I guess at this point, we will go ahead and start with Q&As. If anybody had any questions in the chat, we'll do that. Or feel free to raise your hand and come off mute. And Yusef said you can also text the word "in the exception" to 52886 and then follow the prompt.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bonnie Orton, and I was invited by Waleisah. I appreciate the invite. I work for Alliance and Safety and Justice, which is a national nonprofit that does a lot of work around safety, as well as advocacy for people that are formerly incarcerated. And I'm very moved by what I've heard here this evening. And I want us to branch into Georgia and, you know, have a listening session to talk to people about what their concerns are legislatively, things that they think that should be changed in Georgia as our organization moves across the country. But I'm very, like I said, I appreciate the invite and the opportunity to learn more about what is going on in Georgia, because Georgia is one of the 10 most incarcerated states in the U.S. And we plan to have a presence in the state to help people deal with collateral consequences. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Bonnie, for joining us. We have any other questions? We have any questions for the panelists? Yusef, I know you're a little chatty.
I'm waiting my turn because I don't really have a question. I have comments to make.
Okay, well, you good. Go ahead. We're waiting on you.
Okay. First and foremost, to the panel, excellent job. Great information that you've shared with everyone. And I'm appreciative of you all opening up and sharing your experiences. My name is Yusuf Hasan. I'm one of the founding members of the Abolish Slavery National Network. We are a national coalition of many different states where we've successfully made constitutional amendments in 7 different states. And we have about 3 for this year and about 22 for next year. So it's a lot of stuff that we have going on. And I'm hoping that Georgia, well, I know Georgia will be there next year. I'm going to be confident Georgia will be there next year as one of the states being added to removing constitutional slavery from their constitutions. As far as the federal amendment, you can go to intheexception.com. That's basically spearheaded by Worth Rises. They operate outside of the ASNN, but sort of like in conjunction with us, because we know that it's going to eventually lead to an Article 5 convention of states. We're going to need about 38 states in order to repeal and replace the 13th Amendment. You can't amend the U.S. Constitution. It has to be repealed and replaced. So what we've proposed is it's a proposed 20th Amendment. So that's just an update on that information. Also, along with Max Parthis, I'm the co-host of the Abolition Today podcast. That's why she knows I'm very chatty, because I sit and I chat for 2 hours. And we've been around since March of 2020, and we've covered so many different aspects of slavery abolition. We've covered, the money, all the major players, all the people who exploit. All that information is there. You can find us on all streaming platforms. We air live every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can find that at abolitiontoday.org. Am I forgetting anything? I feel like I'm forgetting something. Yes. I know we had mentioned briefly a bit about Juneteenth earlier, and many may not know like the significance of Juneteenth. So when Abraham Lincoln introduced the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, it didn't reach all of the states, and the proclamation was only intended for the southern states, those that were states in rebellion, as he called it. So the Confederate states. It wasn't intended for any of the northern states or any of the border states. And it was in June of 1865 when the information reached Galveston, Texas, when General Gordon Granger issued General Order Number 3, letting them know that they were quote unquote free. But we know that in 1888, April 16, 1888, Frederick Douglass, he gave his famous speech that most people don't know. It's called "I Denounce the So-Called Emancipation as a Stupendous Fraud." I encourage you to read that, because he breaks down what he saw from 25 years of traveling throughout the country. That he saw that, hey, all they did was swap over, because we know when the 18th Amendment got ratified in December of 1865 and signed into law on December 18th of 1865, it was just 2 weeks later when some of the first convict lease and black codes went into effect. So it was a plan that they had already. How I'm doing? I had a little bit more time. Anyone? Okay, I'm gonna wrap up. So the significance of Juneteenth is only acknowledging a moment in time. So you'll hear a lot of people talking about it being the end of slavery, but as we heard from all of the women this evening, they gave you personal experience of how they were enslaved, and the experience many people have experienced from loved ones being enslaved. So we know slavery hasn't ended, and so that's why I applaud all of us of none in Georgia. The ASNN is going to support as much as we can, in any ways we can. This is why I didn't get an invitation, but the person who got the invitation wasn't able to make it. So he said, Yusuf, I need you to go. And he asked some others to come. I see Gina is on the call as well. So this is a national movement. We need all hands on deck. So again, thank you. And I will pass it back to you, Waleisah.
Oh, well, Yusuf, I'm waiting on my invitation for the Abolition Today.
You know what? Say no more.
All right.
I got you.
But I am actually always in, I know I wanted to ask Atia a question. I know one of the things about the article that really, really struck me was, and for those of you who hadn't got the article, we dropped it in the chat a couple of times, but it was about this guy who got stopped for a minor traffic offense. And was it a broken tail light? He had to go to court. He couldn't pay. That snowballed into thousands of dollars in debt. And so is this something that I know that is that something that the Southern Center for Human Rights works on? I know the answer, but I'm just asking you. With the ending, the criminalization of poverty, and so what is that what are the main 2 or 3 things that when people say the criminalization of poverty, what are some of the things that we should be thinking about when we're talking about that?
We should be thinking about the fact that we criminalize almost everything in this state. He was pulled over for a broken taillight, and in Georgia, he was facing 12 months of probation for that alone. In other states, that's a citation at best, a warning on a typical day. And he was facing jail time for that and for driving without a license. We criminalize almost everything under the sun, which plays a huge role in the fact that, I think as one of the other speakers said, Georgia ranks among the top 10 states in the United States in its incarceration rate. But what that means, because the US is the world's global leader in incarceration, it means that Georgia is one of the world's leaders in incarceration, right? So when we criminalize everything, it makes it extraordinarily easy for people to be ensnared in this system. The next part of it is the fact that here in Georgia and in neighboring Alabama, we allow for-profit companies who are driven by a money-making agenda to supervise people who are on probation. And so what that means is that you have probation companies like the one that supervised Mr. Colby, the one that knew that he could not pay his fines any longer because he had back surgery, because he lost his job and the restaurant closed. Instead of working with him to develop a payment plan, they took out a warrant for his arrest. They went to the court and got a warrant for his arrest, right? And they did this in large part because they were far more focused on collecting fees from this man who couldn't afford to pay them than helping him. But that's what happens when you have for-profit companies. It's the same thing that you see in the prison system, right? You have prisons that are driven by profit. And what that means for the people who are ensnared in their cages is that when they need medical care, they can't get it because the prison doesn't want to pay for it. And so again, we have this money-making agenda in our criminal legal system, which goes back to the phrase of a market in incarcerated people. And so I think when you combine those two, and then you bring in the fact that people don't have access to lawyers, typically like Mr. Colby didn't when he had his case, all these things combine to create this crisis in incarceration and this crisis in caging, and frankly, this criminalization of poverty that we see in Georgia and so many other states. And so if we really want to challenge mass caging in this state and in this country, we have to look at the ways in which we are using poverty as an excuse to put people in cages.
Thank you so much. Okay. Well, it looks like we may be finishing 10 minutes earlier. So what I'm going to do is drop these last 3 petitions in the chat. That is our petition to end slavery in Georgia. That is the petition from Women on the Rise to stop the new jail. And it's also for you to go to End the Exception, to tell your Congress members to sponsor that federal bill to end the exception in the 13th Amendment. And as Yusef told you earlier, you don't want to go to the website, you can also text the word end the exception, one word, to 52866. I'll copy that and put that back in. And other than that, I really would like to thank everyone. And if you got time, I want to show you before we left our 2-minute call to action video I wanted you all to see. And we will end on that. So let me see if I can find it here. Here we go.
You can wear them with anything in your closet. Crown Vintage, only at DSW.
Here in Georgia, more and more jobs are being filled by incarcerated people who are not paid to do them. This takes jobs away from the rest of the state and turns a jail sentence into enslavement. Let's look at what's happening. The 13th Amendment makes slavery illegal, except as a punishment for crime. This means that it's legal for prisons to make money by forcing incarcerated people to work for free and outsourcing that labor to different companies. But forced labor goes beyond fair punishment for breaking the law. Being forced through violence and retaliation to work for no pay, sometimes in dangerous situations, is a violation of basic human rights. Incarcerated workers are excluded from basic workplace protections, so they can be sent with minimal training to work in unsafe conditions without protective gear that would be standard in other workplaces. Corrections departments and local governments market enslavement as a benefit to taxpayers. In fact, it's a detriment to taxpayers and job seekers who were denied those same jobs and left unemployed. And many of the companies that use slave labor won't hire employees with a criminal record. So you could do a job for years for free and then not get hired to do it for a paycheck. Because it's so hard to find a job, formerly incarcerated people are often forced to rely on public benefits that taxpayers pay for. We all deserve to be treated with dignity and paid a fair wage for our work, whether we're incarcerated or not. The good news is, the people have the power to change Georgia's constitution and make modern-day slavery illegal. Call your legislators, visit our website, and share this video with a friend. Together, we can end slavery in Georgia.
And that is our 2-minute call to action video. We won that with a grant about 6 months ago. So I would like to thank you all so much for joining us. And again, those of you who we may see on the call next week, the Georgia chapter is partnering with Worth Rises as well as Mural Arts. And we are looking for a building in the Atlanta area to do a in the exception in slavery in Georgia mural. And that info session will be on Wednesday, the 21st. I'll drop that link one more time. And we'll also be looking for formerly incarcerated artists who are able to do the mural, and they'll receive $6,000 plus the other assistance that they'll need to get that done. I would like to thank you all so much for joining us. This will at some point be uploaded to our YouTube page. And also, if you would like to save all the links in the chat, you can do that by clicking the 3 dots. Thank you all so much. And just always remember, I know a lot of you all are going to be going to Juneteenth events this weekend. Please be safe. And whatever you do, stay out of Florida. But please be safe. Use good caution and have fun. You know, this is something that we look forward to every year. But also what you've learned here, take it somewhere else and share it with someone else. He said, stay out of Louisiana too. Okay. Anywhere in the South look like. But thank you all so very much. We appreciate you attending, especially those of you who worked all day and have graced us with your time. Thank you so very, very much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Stream.